it can't be found among its parts, but we nevertheless call it a hand. And we don't do so randomly. This is important to understand. We don't call this a hand one day and a cow the next day. Yeah? There's an order to it. And we agree on this as a, as a convention, as society, we agree on certain terms, and we can very much, communicate with each other because we have those concepts, because we have these words. So that's a good thing. However, the problem does not lie with imputation. And during my last talk in Tel Aviv, we talked about this, and there was one man, he actually asked a very good question, and I wasn't even aware he did in the moment. I got back and I started thinking about what he said, and he was like, and this is what I like about Israelis, he was very strong about it. He was like, well, if the self is not the mind, if the self is not what you say it is, why don't you say the mind is doing so and so, right? Why are you not more specific with the language, kind of saying, actually, what is moving is not the hand, it's the thumb. Yeah. Why don't you do that? We can just be more specific with language. If it's always something that isn't the hand, or if you see something that isn't the body, why not be more specific? And actually, if you try to be more specific, you can never be specific. You never find something that is specific enough, because whatever it is always just ever a part of that. Whatever you point at or whatever you look at is, so you can't speak anymore. You can never be that precise. Okay? So he was right, actually. First I thought, yeah, right? But then, you say hand, like, what are you looking at on the hand? That's not actually the hand, you look at the front of the hand. But then really the front of the hand, there's more of the front of the hand, there's also the inside, it's also part of the front. And so you always look at something that's actually not hand. And then when you try to be more precise, you always lose it, right? So we can never be that precise. But we think we are, because of our sense of there's something inherent in that hand. We do think we're very much precise. There's something solidly there. Okay. So, understanding that ignorance to some degree, and what would be helpful would be reading I don't believe I talk about this. 3 talks about this book, and I forget the title. How to see yourself as you really are. Yeah, my soul. Anyway, so this book is just really amazing, and I'm not meaning to be an advertiser or whatever, but it's been translated to Hebrew, so that's a great advantage. And this book, I read it before I came here, of course, because I was asked to talk about it. The 3 talks that I've been giving, that's about that. And I couldn't believe it. It's like, His Holiness has really been able to take the essence of the idea of emptiness and put it in such simple words in a relatively short book. What His Holiness is talking about, there's scriptures and volumes of text just dealing with this. So it's such an amazingly skillful book, and I can't say it's the best book of His Holiness, because I must have read all the books by His Holiness to be able to say that, but it's definitely, one of the best books. His Holiness's books, there's 2 types of them. One type is when His Holiness gave talks, to a certain audience, and they were very specific to the audience, and someone transcribed them and published them as a book. But now I believe His Holiness has started taking time where he actually specifically sat down with someone and kind of dictated whatever he wanted to be said, and then made a book out of that. He didn't write it, literally, someone else did. However, it was really him specifically composing a book. So this is an example of such a book. It's not just talks in Chicago or talks in wherever and then just written down. And it's really amazing. This book, wow, I was like totally taken by it. It's like, how could he? Yes, that's exactly. But in most total text, that's like 500 pages, not just a page. Anyway, so if you're interested in this subject matter, I can only recommend you, because of course the scale of this course is the scope of this course is not big enough that we can go more into details on this emptiness and, well, on the lack of inherent existence of phenomena, the actual nature of phenomena. Yeah, but this can give you, I think, a good idea. Yeah, it's beautiful, and there's some beautiful reasonings, If the self is not the body and the mind, either it's the self is the same as body and mind, or it's separate. And then what is the fault of saying that? If it's the same as body and mind, well, you end up with lots of selves. If it's different from the mind and body, then you can remove mind and body and have a self. Yeah. So if you read this, it's like, yeah, oh yeah, right. Yeah. And a lot of this makes so much sense and is very accessible. And we have a great expert doing the translation, so I can't read the Hebrew, but I trust she's very learned, so you know she really knows what she's translating. She knows the terminology really well. So I think, yeah, it's wonderful that this opportunity is being given to have these books in Hebrew now, because of course it's always easier to read it in your own language. Okay. But then understanding also ignorance. It's always very important to not just think of it ourselves, but to develop a compassionate mind. I mean, a loving and compassionate mind, because thinking that not just I myself have this, you know, this predicament of having that mind that just misperceives things and therefore acts in a very twisted way oftentimes, thinking and acting in a very twisted way. All other beings that I'm, you know, that I know and that I don't know, have such a mind, and having compassion for that. You know how horrible it is. Not just I myself am confused about reality, but so many other beings are hurting themselves so badly. Because this misperception of reality leading to destructive states of mind, destructive emotions such as anger, hatred, resentment, attachment, lust, and so forth. I mean, they harm the person so much more than they harm anyone else. So it's almost like people have wounds already, and I keep putting, you know, chili and salt in their wounds. You know, this is what sentient beings are doing. And sometimes the degree of their suffering is greater, sometimes it's less great, but the potential to suffer is with all beings, even the ones that are very lucky right now, even the ones who are terribly rich, have all the comforts, are very arrogant. I mean, they are already creating the causes to be suffering terribly. To just think of, oh my God, they don't know. Yeah. I mean, oftentimes when I go home to Germany, my family, my friends, the people that, I used to know before I became a nun, I'm thinking, oh my God, they're just throwing away their lives, right? Oftentimes, I mean, they're so concerned about things that really don't matter, so concerned about career and money, and they do things that really harm themselves. I mean, the foods they eat, the lifestyles they live, and just the actions they do, and how they, with their family and their children, and, I mean, they're made so well, but they oftentimes estrange their children because they want it in a certain way, and then with their spouses, right? First they thought they were so great and wonderful, and suddenly they realized things weren't just that wonderful and great, and then, very difficult to deal with it, and it's almost like they have to change, I don't need to, there's so much confusion. I mean, so many, I go into the big city and there's so many thousands of people running around, only concerned with just what is here right now. And if it means they have to harm someone, or, okay. But really they're harming themselves. They have no opportunity to, all they have is what they see right now. Oftentimes they're so depressed, don't see real meaning in their lives. Their life seems so empty, but they can't do anything about it. I have no way out. And it's so sad. I mean, really, love and compassion, it doesn't have to be people who are starving, and of course those people too, but even just the ones who are very ignorantly and arrogantly run through the world, and basically they're like carrying like hot coal in their hands, burning themselves. I mean, it's very difficult to have compassion for the ones that are arrogant and, all full of them, but really they deserve our, our caring and our love just as much as the ones that actually admit, oh, they're really suffering. There's so many problems around. I mean, so many people have to, have such incredibly serious mental diseases. And at the outside, they're all kind of cheery and don't want to show it, but inside looks so much differently. So, I mean, it makes so much sense to have love and compassion for those, to really want those people to be happy. They just don't know. Just as we do so many twisted things out of ignorance. So we shouldn't hate ourselves for that either. And that's, of course, always the first step, to love ourselves, to accept ourselves for who we are. Because we can't be loving and accepting of others if we're not loving and accepting of ourselves. So there's a very fine balance between over exaggerating who we are, our importance, right? At the same time, also accepting who we are, right? Being accepting of our good and bad qualities. And this is definitely something not easy to be done, because oftentimes we're much more accepting of other people's faults than we're accepting of our own. We're very much forgiving when it comes to the failure of our good friends or, you know, someone close to us. We can forgive their failure, but not our own. There's a sense of, and this again, this seems so contradictory, this kind of sometimes self-hatred or the low self-esteem that we have. It's actually, again, an exaggerated sense of I. I need to be perfect. Others don't. So my expectations to myself are much higher than the expectations I have towards other people. So this is why I'm more likely to hate myself if I don't live up to my expectations. There's low self-esteem. What is low self-esteem? Oh, I can't do anything. That is not true. How could we be thinking that? I mean, if I look around, all of us in this room, and most people, we can all do, we have incredible qualities, many of us. Other people love us, you know, why can't we love ourselves? Just because we just want to have it perfect, we want to have the best and the greatest, and we can't get it, and we feel low about it. So the first step, I think, very important, to accept ourselves for who we are. See the good and the bad, and focus on the good, because that's what we need to enhance. We have already love and compassion. We can love people, which means love just means the wish for others to be happy. Even our romantic relationships, they're not all attachment. Sometimes it's attachment. Oh, this I can get back from this relationship. This is what he or she can give to me. This is what I need. You know, I can't be without them. It's attachment. It's like sticking, kind of trying to hold on to it. It's the meaning of attach, you know, an attached male kind of, you know, this kind of holding on to something. Yeah. Desire, also here it's a different type of desire. It's not just wishing for something. Desire, sometimes the word is a little misused. It's a deluded desire, which is like wanting something, seeing something in the other person which isn't there, totally exaggerating the good stuff, and and I myself exaggerating how I exist, and then wanting this thing to gratify this illusion of an I, right? So, love means that with the other person, we want them to be happy. And if they're not around, that's okay, because if we know they're happy, that's fine. We don't have to be... See, the stronger the attachment, the harder we find it to be without them. The harder we find it when some woman looks at them, you know, because we somehow feel, like in the relation of a man, and it works the other way around, of course, you know, jealousy is because we think everyone will see them as wonderful, right? Oftentimes we're so jealous when another person talks to that guy or woman, because somehow we think everyone must see them they're wonderful. Right? That's the first, the stronger the attachment, the stronger that sense is. And then, of course, you know, sometimes people are attracted to them. And it's hard to not be jealous, of course, you know. Of course, it's not easy, but to identify it, first of all. And if my love is really like, I want them to be happy, then I can bear it when, you know, they talk to someone else and maybe have a relation with someone else. And in the end, my jealousy is not going to, you know, keep them, depending on how, you know, I mean, we need to show them that we care, but still not make a problem such that it's such a problem that, you know, both parties or whoever more gets upset about it. Yeah. So love really means to want the other person to be happy, and not like, what can I get out of it? And of course, no one expects us to be free from attachment right away. We can't. And again, this is accepting also our attachment. Yeah, accepting, you know, we are also attached. This is very difficult to have a relationship with someone without attachment, even for a monk or nun. I mean, I'm not talking about a romantic relationship, we don't have those types of relationships, but there's other relationships, and we do get attached to friends and teachers and so forth. So to identify, you know, try and be aware of this, kind of be mindful, be sometimes look inside, try and understand your own, the good and the bad, you know, really identify it, not always looking outwards, but really inwards. And I think this is such a great opportunity now during those 2 days, because you're silent. So you're kind of forced to look inwards. It may be scary at first, but what is there so scary, right? There's nothing scary, there's good and bad, it's like a mixture of that. So the first step is to look at it and identify it. and be very accepting of, tolerant of who we are. Yeah. And then we understand a little bit what is to be worked with, and then to start looking at what is that we don't like, and identifying it. Oh, how does it work? How can I undo it? How can I counteract it? Because it's not permanent, it's impermanent. We can change it, we can do things about it, and find, develop our own teacher, our own internal guru. Yeah, the external guru, people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, these very special beings, some of the incredible lamas, Rinpoches and so forth, they can guide us. There's great guidance coming from them. But we also ourselves need to develop this inner guide. It's kind of common sense. It's kind of an inner wisdom that guides us. Yeah? We know ourselves so well. So to be very honest with ourselves, to be truthful, look inside and see what are the different, and what is looking, of course, is one mind, looking at the different other minds, different habits, habitual kind of tendencies that we have. And see and look at them. Oh, how do I always react? What do I do? Okay, so that's the first step, to be loving towards yourself. And then we can also spread it out towards others. And how could we not? It's so easy to love an innocent child that's suffering. But really, we're almost like innocent children suffering. In a sense, innocent in the sense we don't know. We don't know better, right? We don't know better. We hurt ourselves. We're like someone who's, putting a knife into ourselves all the time. And everyone does that. Because the harm that we give out, it harms us so much more than other people, actually. Because the results are so much greater of the effects of our actions. Anyway, so I just want to make sure that even we talk about the 12 links, and it's very much related to the I, that we don't forget others, and don't forget the sense of compassion and care for others. It's so important, including ourselves, of course. And Geshe Pujungwa, he was a great Kadamba master. Kadamba master are those who are very much do the trainings of mind training, Lojong. So some of you may be aware of these beautiful practices where really love and compassion is very much a part of one's day-to-day practice of transforming problems into a practice of love and compassion, right? Regarding an annoying person as a teacher, as being grateful to people that are annoying because they help us to practice patience and love. Yeah, so this kind of attitude to life. So the Kadamba masters were very famous for doing this, transforming any kind of problem into one's practice. So while walking around, while just living your life, you can be an incredible Dharma practitioner by doing what they did. So the Kadamba masters, so one of them was Geshe Pujungwa, and he was a disciple of Dromtemba. So last weekend we talked about this text by Atisha and Dromtemba. And so yeah, Dromtemba was the lay person, a great disciple of Atisha, and his disciple was called Pujungwa, or Geshe Pujungwa. Geshe in those days did not mean the title of study. Geshe actually just means virtuous friend. Gewe Shinyan. Gewe Shinyan means, Gewa means virtue, Shinyan means friend, Gewa means virtue, and Geve is just what's the word, like off, saying off, the genitive, yeah, it's just the genitive. So Gewe Shinyan means as friend of virtue, or virtuous friend. And somehow it became this kind of title that people get after doing a certain amount of, education, going through this education. But in those days, it meant someone who was a spiritual friend. So the spiritual friend, Pujungwa, he took the 12 links, and he said, the understanding of the 12 links is very important for the fundamental vehicle, in other words, the Hinayana practices that we have to very much do, very important practices. So to look at our own lives, reflect upon our own predicament, and develop a wish to overcome our restrictions. But then exactly that same idea of the 12 links, we need to then understand that others are exactly trapped the same way we are. Ignorance, then this, then this, then this, we're chained by those 12 links. And other beings are just like us, and they just deserve our care. Just as we care for our own happiness, we need to care for their happiness, because we're all connected. Yeah. He said, this practice is amazing. These 12 links, you can do fundamental practices, the Hinayana practices, which are the foundation for everything, but then you can move on to the Mahayana, to the, universal vehicle, if you like, practices that, take into consideration all sentient beings and wanting to benefit all sentient beings. Okay. So, ignorance. Therefore, I hope this is clear, this mind, unawareness or misapprehension or ignorance, whatever it's called. The way I've described it, so the ignorance itself is not so much of a problem. It's what the ignorance induces. It's these destructive emotions, it's anger, jealousy, all exaggerated states of mind that are very harmful. And what did they do us? What did they induce? What happened? So there's really this, and this is not all depicted in the 12 links. So we have action, number 2, which actually means compositional action, which means contaminated action, or action of body, speech, and mind. Action of body, speech, and mind. So there's a lot to be said about karma, basically, actions. So karma just means action. And we say it's contaminated because it's contaminated in the sense it's totally under the force or under the control of ignorance. All our actions right now are under the control of that misapprehension. Yeah, if we're very honest, everything we do is about I, me, and mine, in an exaggerated sense. So even the positive things that we do, there's always that ignorance that is in there that's kind of influencing everything. Yeah? So even our practice of patience and of generosity, we can't help it, but there's always a sense of I'm a little more important. When we're generous, oftentimes we want people to know about it, or we want some reward, or there's always this, until we really overcome that ignorance, and it can be overcome. We can get rid of this ignorance. But until we do that, until we get rid of that kind of unawareness, whatever we do, even the positive actions will be, in a sense, contaminated. Right? But the first step is, of course, if all we have to choose from, positive actions and negative actions, both are contaminated, we still want the positive. Yeah? We want to engage into virtuous actions, because the more happiness we experience, the more, the more conducive our state is. Let's say being born in a state, let's say like if you're born in some very poor area in India, no way we can take off a weekend and do a retreat or do any meditation. We just don't have the time, we don't have the leisure to do so. If we're born with incredible disease, incredible sickness, we just don't have the leisure and the freedom of mind, the space of mind to do the things we can do right now. So even though the existence we're in right now, that is already a plus point. So it's almost like we're very much in chains, but we can kind of make these chains a little looser as we go on. Allow ourselves to give a little bit more freedom, which then in turn helps us to gain more wisdom and eventually totally overcome any chain, any control by any destructive emotion. So it's a matter of, first of all, it's very difficult in this lifetime to be totally liberated. It's just not realistic. It takes more than one lifetime, right? So to take into consideration, there's going to be future lifetimes. Let's just be realistic. When I first became a nun, I wasn't realistic. I was like, in this lifetime I'll enter the path, and then I do the, I thought it was going to be very, very quick. But there is no quick fix, because our mind is so habituated in the way it is. And we all know how difficult it is to get rid of certain just habits. Forget about an ingrained, habitual, entrenched misperception of reality. Yeah, it's very difficult to change. But there's no deadline, So we shouldn't be like, oh my God, you need to do it now. I mean, we have this Western mind, oh, as quick as possible, as quick as possible. It's our Western, very much Western culture. There's fast food, there's fast this, there's fast that. And somehow we feel it's a fast dharma, But there isn't. It just takes time. And we shouldn't be looking, how far have I gotten? How far? Because that's, again, the mind that wants to achieve, that wants to be. Just take a step at a time. It's like a drop in a bucket every day. And there's already, if you look back maybe 10, 20 years ago, you see there's huge difference. right? You know, something very valuable, very something we can really rejoice in the changes we've gone through. But it takes a long time. So we need to take into consideration, we'll be reborn. If there is future lives, then we'll be reborn. So even we don't really believe it, let's just be on the safe side, right? Even we don't believe in future lives, we're not 100% sure. It doesn't harm to work towards a future life, whether it's there or it's not. Because what is the method to do so? It's to engage in practices that don't harm ourselves and others. You know, to be kind-hearted, to not steal, kill, to not lie, you know, out of delusion. Of course, I'm not saying, you know, lying to save someone's life, right? That's different, that's of course. But really, our motivation is, of course, very important, to engage in actions out of a motivation to not harm anyone. So these actions are ethical actions, you could say. Either your motivation is to not harm anyone, yeah? Or to at least, you know, if there is any harm involved, the least possible harm, you know, that you can manage. Okay. In terms of short-term harm, long-term harm, short-term harm, long-term harm, long-term harm is more important. To avoid long-term harm is always safer, right? I mean, we all know that. Like, sometimes we have to get an injection. There's a short-term harm, but it has a long-term benefit, yeah? So something like that. Sometimes there may be a short pain or something, but it has a long-term benefit. So without children, you know, sometimes we maybe, you know, in the moment we make them unhappy in order for them long-term to experience happiness. Yeah? So short-term is all right. We can, but out of a pure motivation. So it's really the motivation that counts. And so then, if there are future lives, we make sure we are reborn in a state that is in accordance with these, you know, lack of harm. Yeah? Or even more so, if we can do it even further, not just wanting not to harm others, to even want to benefit others. That's the next step. So to refrain from harm, but maybe even more so, engage in actions that are very beneficial for others. And so with this, in this lifetime we experience more happiness, but also in the future. If there are future lives, well, we make sure we are reborn in states again that are as conducive as they are now, and maybe even more conducive, where we have even more freedom to develop our mind, transform our mind, and not being trapped in some situation we can't get out. Have to work, you know, so hard, and there's no other way for us to survive. Yeah. Or even worse, being born in states, being born as animals, you know, certain animals. Oh my God. I mean, it's just fear, it's just pure survival every day. Yeah. So even we don't believe in future lives, we're safe, whether there are or there aren't. There's no harm in doing this. Yeah. So that's basically the first step, to kind of adjust our actions. So, because actions out of ignorance, they can be manifold. These actions can be positive or negative. Even the positive ones. That's okay, right? If all we can do is manage positive ones, let's do. But even the positive ones do trap us. But before I actually go into these actions, I'd like to say a little bit about karma, just a few of its properties. Because as I said, actually karma is very, very complicated. And to understand some of its properties, I find very helpful. So, karma actually means, the way I like to look at it, is that I exist as a person in this world. And even though I have a very strong sense I'm separate from everyone else, that's just a projection of my own mind. I'm very much connected to everyone else around me. So I've said this, so some people may get bored, I say it over and over again, but those who've heard it before. But, you know, when you think of your body, just as your body, take aside everything else, just as an example, here I'm just using the body as an example. It's a small organism where everything else is connected. So if I eat certain foods that actually just enter my mouth, these foods may have an effect on my entire body because of the connectedness. Whatever chemicals I insert in some area, these chemicals have effects and they go out, and, you know, in the end, like I give the example of my left hand injects my right hand with something. Well, eventually the injector is the left hand, but eventually the left hand will be affected by that. So this is a smaller kind of organism. There's even smaller organisms, microorganisms, such as body cells, for example. You know, very much connected. Everything else is connected. There's a constant kind of interaction between the things that make up the cells and the chemicals and so forth. And our body is a bigger organism. And if we think of this world, well, that's a even bigger organism. You know, all the phenomena of this globe, for example. Yeah, it's an organism that's very much connected. Very much connected. You know, whatever we put out in the environment, well, we've seen it's, you know, it doesn't just get lost. It has effects on the environment. And if you even go on a larger scale, take the whole universe, take the stars and everything, you know, I mean, we have systems such as astrology, where the constellation of stars have an influence on us, right? Even a star that's like light years away can actually, you know, have an influence on us. I don't know whether we believe that or not, but I think, you know, there's probably something to it, you know, astrology, and there's some amazing things that real astrologers, not the ones in those crappy newspapers, kind of talk about, or you could be any of those, you know, all of this applies to you somehow. But no, I'm talking about astrology that's scientifically based. Anyway, the point is, everything is connected, right? I'm very much connected with everyone else around me. Everything I am is because of others. Everything I know is because of others. I sometimes take it for granted, as if, you know, like knowing, being good with, like, you know, I don't have to, if I go 5 and 5, I can go 10. I know if I add 5 and 5, it's 10. I can multiply 3 by 3 and know it's 9. I don't need to think much. I kind of take it for granted. But then I meet Tibetans who were brought up in Tibet and who don't have this access to numbers that we have. And you say, oh, you know, 2 and 2, and they go, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. They can't do it like the way we do it. They don't have that feeling for numbers. So sometimes they tell you their life stories. I mean, anyway, it's a funny story. I think I can share this with you. King Getzelav one time, in the very beginning when I met him, I translated for him, and he told his life story. And he said, when I was so-and-so years old, I did this, and then I was so-and-so years old, and I did this, and then for 5 years I did this, for 8 years I did this, and he added up, and I kept just calculating in my mind. I said, Gena, that one means you're 85 years old. And he's like, oh, maybe it wasn't that long. You see, I mean, we make that mistake, but somehow we're so used to calculating in our minds, we kind of get it right. Even though we don't remember exactly, but we kind of don't go totally over our age. But Tibetans have a different feeling for numbers, so they don't do that. For them, I mean, I kind of take it for granted. It's like, how could they not? But actually, it's just the way I was brought up. Numbers were very much part of our daily life, phone numbers and, you know, the whole thing. So this is something that comes from others. It's not like I ever knew this, I was born with this. No way. I could have been born somewhere near Mount Kailash and still have to use my knuckles to add 2 and 2. So it's because of others. I've learned everything I know is because of others. Everything. Even the letter A. Right? Just, you know, being able to identify as a letter is from others. My body, you know, that I'm still alive, that I sustain myself. Every bowl of food. How many people are involved? How many beings are involved in that? My clothing. Yeah? So just on that coarse level, I'm very much dependent on others. Mentally and physically. And so if I'm so interconnected, whatever thought I think, you know, there's something actually happening. Whatever movement my body makes, there's something happening. You know, it has an effect on the environment. On a, you know, very subtle level, of course it has. But even mentally, thinking things. And sometimes when someone is very, very loving and comes into this room, we can actually feel it. It has an effect on us. And another example I give you, King Getzelav, when he, at the very beginning when I met him, he was very kind. He was the one who actually got me to study and taught me for many years. And he was quite sick, so my father invited him to Germany to get treatment. So he invited him over. And so he spent some time in Germany. And we took him to Bergen-Belsen, the concentration camp. But I forgot to explain, it was just in the spur of the moment, I explained to someone else what it was, but I hadn't explained him, I forgot. And we took him there, and you know, there's nothing, I mean, there's just, you know, it's not like anything cruel to be seen in the sense there are no photographs on first sight. There's a museum, but we didn't take him there. It just looked like a prison, basically. We took him there and he said, "What is this place? This is horrible. This is such a horrible place, you know?" I mean, he could actually feel it. And I said, "Oh, it's this concentration." When he said, "What is a concentration camp?" So I explained him, you know, and he's like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." So there was still something there that he picked up on. I mean, I kind of think, yeah, it must be horrible because I associate it with that. I don't know what's my imagination and what isn't. But I also know when I first came to Dharamsala, I didn't know anything about Dharamsala. I came there and I remember I woke up in the morning and I thought, wow, what is this place? I feel so good here. Because again, it's really people living there doing something with their minds, and their minds has an influence on the environment. The suffering of the people in Bergen-Belsen, even if it's like 56 years ago, it still had done something to the environment. So it shows things don't get lost. We just don't pick them up, or we do sometimes, but we're not sure it's reality. They're so subtle, right? So if you think about that, if that's the case, the thoughts we think don't get lost. The actions we do, body, speech, and mind, even though, you know, kicking someone or stroking someone, the action is gone the moment we stop, there's still some residue. And if we're all connected, it will eventually come back to us, right? Just as my left hand injecting my right hand, eventually my left hand will be affected by that. And that is karma. That is the law of cause and effect. Karma actually, the word karma is used sometimes in a way that can be confusing. Karma just means action, it just means the cause. The cause of the action of body, speech, and mind. Okay? So that is the cause, and that I'm giving something out, and because of the connectedness, it comes back to me. Okay? There's nothing, no one there kind of pulling the switches and deciding, you know, you get this, you get that because of what you've done. It's just a law that just works. And someone asked me in the last course, isn't that unfair? Because if we're ignorant, isn't it unfair that this, you know, law still works? And, you know, the example I'm always thinking of is like, well, even if you're ignorant and you drink out of a poisonous puddle or something, you know, you're still going to get sick, even though you don't know. It's not fair, I didn't know. How can I get sick? That drinking water from, you know, a polluted source makes me sick. Well, you still get sick. It's just the, you know, it's just the law of cause and effect. I didn't know that when I drop this, it'll break. Well, still, it's gravity. It's a law of gravity. It's still going to break. You know, there's nothing it's just a law of nature. So likewise, if I give things out that are harmful, in other words, disturbing the harmony of phenomena around me, I'll receive a result of a disturbance of my harmony. And usually it's very much if I kill, eventually I'd be killed. There's certain effects on my actions. And this is the first property of karma, or the law of cause and effect. So sometimes the name karma is given to the effect. We sometimes say, oh, I have a headache or I experienced something. That is my karma. To be more precise, I would be saying that is the result of a certain action, in other words, karma. But that's okay. You can use it that way. We do this all the time. We give the name of the cause to the effect. We say, the sun shines into my room. Well, it's the rays of the sun. That's the effect of the sun. The sun is up in the sky. And the result of the sun are the rays of the sun. It takes some time to come down to the earth. And that is what enters the room. But I can still say, I have a lot of sun in my room. I get a lot of sun in my room. It's a way of speaking. So I can say, whatever happens to me is my karma. I'm actually meaning, I give the name of the cause to the result. So it's the result of my karma, of my action of body, speech, and mind. So it's a law of cause and effect, this one. Okay, so, I mean, even the Buddha accumulates action, right? Even the Buddha accumulates karma. I mean, of course, the Buddha accumulates actions, and these actions have results. No problem. But our action, but his actions are free of ignorance. They're out of wisdom, out of love and compassion. They have just wonderful effects. They're very much in harmony with the interconnectedness of everyone, everything, right? So the Buddha would never do anything that would be harmful to anyone because of his or her awareness of the interconnectedness. But we are not aware of that. We kind of exaggerate what's here, totally ignore what's over there, right? And give out actions that disturb the harmony and eventually come back to us. Okay. So, this is the first property of karma, the certainty of karma. It's a law that certain actions bring back certain results because of the interconnectedness. The second is the magnification of karma, which means that karma, you can engage in a small action, but this small action can have incredible results. Yeah? So this is not always the case with external causes, but you can have a tiny apple seed and have a huge tree growing out of it. You can have tiny few particles of uranium and have a huge explosion. You can have a tiny fire starting somewhere nearby and have a huge disaster. Sometimes the causes, it just needs as much as a match. Small causes are very small, but they're magnified. The same is true for our actions. When we engage into just a tiny action of caring and love, can have incredible results of getting that care and love back. On the contrary, on the negative scale, we can engage in actions that are very, very like tiny harmful actions, and they can have great, horrible results, unwanted results. So this is why it's so important. Don't ignore the good little things, you know? It's like, yeah, we won't be able to give millions of dollars maybe, but maybe sometimes a shekel or two, you know, has a great effect on the person, but also on ourselves, because we deserve to be happy, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to be happy, right? It's not even considered selfish to want to be happy. Selfish means to consider my happiness more important than anyone else's. That's selfish. But to just, you know, I want to be happy just as everyone else wants, that's a very legitimate wish. So, if I give out a little bit of generosity, it's a great result that can come back to me. So don't underestimate the good things. Don't underestimate the little good deeds, if you like, right? Even just having positive thoughts. And then likewise, don't underestimate the negative ones. Right? If your anger starts and you're like, oh, let me just be angry for 5 minutes, I just so enjoy it. You know, it's like, yeah, if you enjoy it, fine, go ahead. But be aware of what comes back to you. So do I really want that? Is it really worth it? Yeah. Yes? Oh, we need to have questions. Actually, this is a good time to stop here. Okay, so let's open it for question and answers, because we only have half an hour left. And I do go a little slow here. But I need to go a little slow because the beginning is the most important part. And then later on is quite quick, it's quite fast. So I promise we'll really move on. And we also move, of course, back to this text. Yeah, but there's still a little bit more of introductory kind of material. And then it's easy to move on from there. But yes, if you have any questions, please, this is the time to ask. You had a question.
I'm afraid that I miss something because the explanation of action and result in karma. I understood that we are interconnected.
Yes.
So if I'm thinking about something, if I want to harm someone, it will come to me someday, somehow. But logically, I can't understand that because if the interconnected is something not personal, so it is like to put ingredients in the soup. So if I put something bad, it harms all the soup. Okay, and everybody will suffer if the soup will be
destroyed. Yeah.
Destroyed. So still, it can be logically that I can do something bad or good, and the effect will be on others, and not personally on me, because the cause and effect, as I
That's a good question. That's a good question. I think I understand the question. Let me just give you an answer and see whether that answers your question. So, Yes.
May I suggest for the recording, it's impossible to hear the questions,
I
even
tried
if
to
you have a
repeat it.
very, very loud voice. So you
Okay.
either take a mic or you repeat the questions.
I'll
please,
try to
because
repeat
when
it.
Somebody transcribed is impossible. It's
Yeah, yeah.
only answers.
Okay, I tried to repeat it, and maybe we can give out the. Is there a microphone? Oh yeah, yeah. So I try to repeat your question, see whether it's actually correct what I said. But you're basically saying you can see how your actions are getting out there and have an effect on all people around you. So for example, the soup. You have a soup and you put ingredients in it and you can totally spoil the soup. And then do other things that affect other people. But what does that have to do with you? How does it actually come back to you? What is there to kind of, come back to you? Is that your question?
Of course, if the soup is not good, eventually I eat it and I be sick of it.
Yeah. So this is not talking about eating the soup.
No,
Even
yes.
without eating the soup.
Yes, but the karma is so personally.
Mm-hmm.
So why I cannot see in this explanation
Yes, I see.
the connection.
Right. Because I didn't really finish it totally, the explanation. I actually just wanted to give this idea that there is a connection with other people, so this can come back, the sense of like the domino stone effect. But really something that is very important is that every time I think a thought, and I guess kind of looked at it how it goes outwards, I kind of explained that, but every time I think a thought, every time I say something that again is induced by a mental state, right? Every time I do a physical action, like stroking someone, being, kind of hugging someone or beating someone, there's something happening mentally and it doesn't get lost and something is left on my mental continuum, yeah? So this, I didn't explain this part yet. There's something left on my mental continuum and sometimes external circumstances, also due to me giving out and so forth, and then my internal imprint can lead to the ripening of such, yeah? Yes. So this is important. I'm glad you brought it up because I didn't want to kind of have half the explanation. So the moment you said it, I said, yes, I should have definitely finished that part of the explanation. That when you do something, it's always a mind involved. This is why the motivation is so important. And there is something left on the mind. It's like, they call it like a seed or like a, sometimes imprint. The word imprint is used. A seed, like in the sense that something is there that which then have the potential to grow into some effect. So nothing that we think gets lost. So it's obvious in the sense like what we can feel in terms of the environment, what we think even other people can pick up on. But likewise, we thought the thought, and the thought is gone, some new thought has come, but there's a residue left. And that will be kept in our consciousness. Yeah? And this is why the third link is consciousness. Yeah? Consciousness is there all the time, but here we're looking at a certain consciousness. Let's say one, out of ignorance, there's one action. There's one action, and that action is now stored in my consciousness. And that is the new consciousness I have with a new action in it. I mean, every moment is a new consciousness, if you like. It's a new mind. So when I say the mind changes moment by moment, it doesn't just mean we have new thoughts every moment, but our thoughts form our mind in the sense they leave some residue in our mind, which then ripens in the future, or maybe very, very briefly, shortly afterwards, with certain effects. So you see, when you really come down to it, it's very, very complicated. But every thought we think leaves some residue on our mind. Does not get lost. Yeah, so every thought is important. So don't get too caught up on it, I mean, oh my God, it's not worth it. I mean, sometimes just let it go, right? I mean, don't be too uptight about it, but also be aware nothing gets lost. Right? It's a very good question. I'm glad you said it. Thank you. You brought it up. Okay.
Can you add examples to that, please?
Benny?
Okay. Can you give an example for that? He said. Can you give an example for that? Yes. For let's say I give you an example in this context here. This is what I was going to do after the break, but let's do it right now because I think it's the time to do so. So there are certain actions, so many different actions, of course, and this I'll talk about later on. But there are certain actions. So let's specifically pick one that is responsible. Let's say I be reborn as a dog in my next life. It's possible, right? So out of ignorance, there's a strong sense of I, and I may behave in a certain way that is like, you know, maybe like a dog-like behavior, you know, take away your food and kind of, you know, bite you, and, you know, like the actions, you know, sometimes out of ignorance. And there's some cute dogs, I'm not trying to be horrible, but they sometimes, you know, pretty selfish, you know, when it's about food. So I may react in such a way, and it's a very strong action, very much motivated out of selfishness, and somehow leaves the imprint to be reborn as an Indian street dog, for example, right? So this out of a strong, I mean, there's a lot happening. I do something really selfishly, and then this leaves something in my mind. And it's, you see, this is the connection. It can ripen as being reborn as a street dog in the future, but the action has been done now. There must be a connecting thread there, right? And this is what I'm talking about here. So this imprint is left in my consciousness. Yeah? It may be stored there for many, many, many lifetimes. Yeah? It may be stored there, but it may also, due to certain circumstances, and it's very hard to tell which one they are, but, you know, certain states of mind are then responsible for that to ripen, and for me, maybe in my next or after that life, be reborn as a dog. Yeah? So this would be an example of that. But this is just the example of a karma that is so strong that is responsible for taking a certain body. It could also be another karma that is responsible for me just being depressed one afternoon. Right? Just the cause for depression. Yeah? I've done something horrible. I've made someone very, very depressed. You know? Intentionally. It's important. I'll talk about this more also. Intention needs to be involved. The karma is always different if there's no intention. But let's say it's all there, all the facets are there. Intentionally, I really want to hurt someone. And that leads to this person being, you know, terribly upset. Then, this leaves something in my continuum, in my mental continuum. And then due to external circumstances there also, it's not just the internal, it's also external circumstances, that one day may ripen. And I'm terribly depressed. There may be an external reason for me being depressed, but there may not be. Sometimes there's not a, you know, external reason for it. Sometimes there is. As I said, there's other circumstances that are also responsible. It's very intricate, very sophisticated, very, you know, complicated. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you do this action, it does not get lost. Other people may pick up on it, but more importantly, there's an imprint left. There's some residue left on the mental consciousness. And that mental consciousness, that imprint, when the coarser consciousness stops functioning, when our brain stops working while we die, when we die, our brain stops working, so the coarser mind cannot function anymore because its basis is disintegrating. Then that coarser mind dissolves into subtler levels of mind, and the imprints are still there. Yeah? And then on the subtlest level of mind that is not active right now, the imprints stay with that, they're stored there, and then move on to the next life. So it doesn't get lost. And it explains why we have all sorts of experiences, even though we weren't taught, even though we weren't, you know, it still happens because these results ripen in the life to come. Does this answer that question? Okay. And how this exactly works? Well, there's the subject of this course, of course. I hope to be more clear on this. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
You said karma will definitely ripen.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Unless you purify it.
Yeah, unless you purify it. There's a way of purifying it. There's a way of getting rid of negative karma. I haven't said so much about this, but I'm saying here it's certain unless it's purified. Unless there's another way of getting rid of it. It will certainly ripen. Yes.
But it's latent at the moment, and when and where it ripens depends on external conditions.
Mm-hmm. External and sometimes internal states of mind too.
This is the question.
Ah, that's the question. Go ahead. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to say exclusively external circumstances. But I mean, for example, if we have the karma to die in a plane crash, well, we need to have a plane. You know, I mean, to die in a plane crash without a plane is difficult. So, I mean, there's like certain external circumstances too. Or we need to, if you have the karma to be, you know, accused of something by someone, when you need someone to accuse you. So it's like sometimes the external circumstances are right. Internally, there's certain states of mind that arise. And they don't have to be negative. I mean, they can be, it's very difficult. This is why karma is so complicated. How can you know what karma ripens? Well, you don't. It can be all sorts of, you know, it's like things reacting with each other. Sometimes you have a very loving mind, and somehow that and the external environment and somehow the circumstances are ripe for this karma to ripen. And it could be something negative too. Yeah? This is what we don't understand about karma, but this is like on a quantum level, you know, quantum physics. There's a certain level when you have no idea what's going on anymore. This is why they have the uncertainty principle, I guess, you know, because on a certain level you can't see it anymore. It's so subtle. So the aura, yeah. So this is what I mean. With even like mental states can be responsible for a karma to ripen, but don't have to.
I thought that my question was very good, but the airplane kind of destroyed it. Because I had the impression that somehow my mind has to do a lot with the interpretation or the way I perceive the external reality. So, if that was right, or is right, then what gives the space for, you said you can, because we've got strong habits, strong habits means it comes into, it means like imprints on my mind stream, and if my mind is responsible for the conditions as well, what gives the space?
The freedom to make a choice.
Freedom to make the slowly change.
Okay. So her question is basically, let's say, I mean, I think it depends on the karma that ripens. It's almost like, if there's also external circumstances, can you not do anything about anything that ripens, right? Like let's say you get sick, right? But you see, sickness, in order to get a certain sickness, you must have certain, you know, chemicals and certain, you know, to make you sick. You must have the karma to get sick. And then when you get sick, mentally you can nevertheless deal with it in a way thinking, well, you know, this is a karmic result and there's nothing to be depressed about. So you can actually choose to kind of think in a certain way, you know, and try not to be depressed. I mean, you have the karma maybe to be depressed. You have the karma not to be depressed. You know, you have both karmas. Both karmas are there. And usually, if you think of all the actions in one day, it makes sense that we have a huge variety of different karma. And then your choice of how you deal with this problem may trigger one or the other. You see, like when one karma ripens, it's not like one karma comes on its own. It's usually a sickness. And then with that sickness, you may also have a karma that ripens to be depressed. Yeah, that's possible. Not everyone who's got a sickness gets depressed too. So it's not just one karma ripening. It's the karma to get sick, but then also the karma possibly to be depressed. Some people don't have the karma that goes together, so they're not depressed. They can deal with it, you know, without. Then for some people, both karma ripens. One that you're sick, one that you're also depressed. But there's another karma that of not being depressed, of being able to deal with this. So if you can be able, by you thinking about, oh, this is actually not as bad, you can actually activate that karma by consciously thinking, oh really, it's not that bad, it could be a lot worse. And then you can, you know, kind of overcome that karma. In that moment, the karma of being depressed is then being replaced by the karma of not being depressed, by your, you know, volition. But if you don't have the karma to not be depressed, very difficult to actually overcome it then, until the karma of depression is gone. So maybe a whole afternoon you're depressed, and then the next day it stops. So sometimes we can do something. The same is true when other people are sick. I usually give this example. But someone is sick, does that mean we shouldn't do anything? We shouldn't help them anymore? No, because they may have the karma to be cured, right? So it's up to us, yeah, to help them, to try everything to help them, because they may have the karma to be cured. If they don't, and this sometimes also happens, we give them any medicine, we give them any treatment, they don't get better. So in this moment, the karma is so strong, it has to be totally exhausted. You know, there's nothing you can counteract it with. So this is my example here. You need a lot of karma. A lot of karma is, it's so much is happening in every situation. So we talk about one karma, but it's not just one karma. It's different things. And because we have all these different karmas, we can use our wisdom and then maybe make sure that one or the other one ripens. And they do oftentimes. Does that make sense? There's still free will. Yes, go again.
Sure. The sentence here, you have all these karmic imprints in my mind stream, true, I've got everything. and I can choose to think about maybe I can change it. Don't I need the right imprint to think so? Because someone in India doesn't have it.
You need to have the imprint. There is no self that is independent of. You see, there's our sense there must be some independent self that makes some independent decision. No. Of course, if we don't have, you know, the imprints in some other ways of habitually thinking those ways, we won't. Yeah? I mean, there is no self that is totally independent of anything that happened to us in the past. I mean, there's this idea of like, when you come to a crossroad, you go left or right. Do you make a decision totally independent of anything in the past? No. What we are right now is a result of everything in the past. And whether we go right or left, the decision, we say we make a decision. And there's free will. There is free will in that sense, because you know, we have a sense of like we can choose, but in the end, it's certain causes that are responsible for us to go there, right? There's no independent self that can make a decision, independent of anything else. But there's still a self that makes a decision. I know it's difficult, that one was the hardest, I didn't want to go into free will, but you see, but let's say you go left or right. I mean, there's a difference between, you know, you go to this crossroad, and you can go left or right. There's still a conventional sense of like a freedom, because some people are totally forced to go right. No other, you know, no other choice. But then you can reflect upon it. Should I go left or should I go right? That's what we call a freedom. But the result of it, of course, has a cause in the past, right? Because there is no independent, permanent self that is independent of any causes and conditions. So it's our mind really making the decision. And the mind that makes the decision and makes us go left or right comes from a different mind before, from a different mind before, from a different mind before. So, there is no independent free will. Yes. Yes. There's free will.
10 years. Finally.
That's our party. Vera, does this kind of explain that a little bit? I mean, I want to make sure that this is answered, and you can always come back some other time, but...
I asked this as a result of discussion between the other Leora said.
You and Leora?
Happy.
Yeah, me too is Leora.
Can you help her in the break, maybe? Yeah. I don't know, you're not allowed to talk. No.
I'm not totally
satisfied.
Satisfied. It's easier for me to negate the other option. Why it can't be that we don't have free will. What it doesn't make sense to locate to point the logical, when we analyze it, the logical thinking that leads to the conclusion that there is no free will. That's easier for me.
Okay.
To see that in the crossroad, I can choose
left or right.
Make choice without having
any past experience.
Imprint coming right at this part and is a free will of my own, without this certain imprint writing out at the same time, everything controlled by my mind. Something is missing, but I'll keep thinking.
I mean, you see, like if you go left or right, I mean, in the end, everything we are comes from, and when you call it imprints, I mean, imprints, it's almost like there's a little seed that has to grow. It's not like that. It's actually just like our mind is like a golf ball, and there are just these different, you know, and every moment forms it in a certain way. And so we then say an imprint ripens. It's not like some separate thing that pops up like popcorn or something, right? It's just like, it's just this whatever has formed it, then therefore is also responsible for the decision we make. Yeah? And sometimes we're so trapped, like we can't go left, right, we spend hours there, you know, can't make a decision, and maybe someone else has to pull us. Whereas another imprint ripening for someone to be pulled. Or there's something, oh, I like that tree. That's like a beautiful, it looks like it's very beautiful over there. So there's some childhood memory maybe that is also imprinted in our mind, and then goes, oh, that looks like, oh, maybe that's more interesting. And it may be very subconscious, we may not even be aware of, but there's something we like more about it. There's something that may be scary. And it's scary because we associate it with something scary that we've learned, right? Yeah? So it's really like, that's what I say, everything we are right now is because of causes and conditions in the past. And this is why the decisions we make, they're very much related to everything we've done in the past. There is no random decision as such. Maybe unconsciously there's something, but it's not independent of the past. And you could call the ripening of an imprint in that sense. Like that's kind of looks scary. That looks like some childhood memory of when I was in Eilat, when I was a child, right? It kind of, yeah, and so I want to go there. So it's always an imprint ripening. Yeah, yes.
The problem is, it's not what she was.
Oh, the microphone.
For me,
Alon is keeping healthy.
For me, the problem is not understanding these little things of question and not being able to decide. But if it's like this, like what you described, and I feel it's like this.
Okay.
So the question is, what are we doing? I mean, what is my responsibility? Because at one point I said, and I asked a teacher, is it what I'm doing just using my positive karma? Just. But without me doing it, I'm just following the results of my karma, and that's it.
It's like a puppet. You're like a puppet of your...
Yeah. So
no, because there's a mind that is called wisdom that you have. You have that mind, wisdom. And whatever were the causes and conditions, but that wisdom is there. There's another mind that's loving. Yeah? And it moves you from there. And due to circumstances, nevertheless, your wisdom develops. Your love develops. These states of mind, they move on. They're not going to be stuck. It's not like it's just experience your results, experience your results. No, your mind moves on. There's certain thoughts that you think. Your wisdom, your introspection, your positive qualities are there. Yeah? There is no person controlling it. This is how we feel it. Like, there must be someone controlling those to put me in the right direction. Right? Isn't that how it feels? Like, it's almost like I'm just a passive kind of experiencer of my past acts, and I cannot move on anymore. Yeah? Isn't that a sense of that missing?
Not exactly. I don't think I cannot move, but I am moving, but I am moving by my karma. For example, when you say that my wisdom mind is developed, what does it mean? It developed because I have certain seeds, certain imprints, and certain conditions are ripening, so it can be developed.
Right.
Sometimes it's not, but it's not.
Okay.
Me.
You see, we have a funny idea again of karma, and this is again we have a sense there's something in the past that is still controlling, but that's not what we mean with karma. It's not like there's something back in the past. It's almost like we're in the present, but this thing in the past controls us now. That's not what it's meant. It's really not like that. I mean, it's actually, you see, every moment, our consciousness, and that is the main, we don't need to think so much about the mind here. Everything that's happening is happening on a mental level. Yeah? And so, every moment, there is an imprint. So let's not call it karma. There's an action, a mental action, which gives rise to another action, which gives rise to another action. And so each of these moments assists the next one, it assists the next one. And so if it's not like this past imprint somehow still sitting there controlling us, this is not what's happening. I mean, sometimes there is some residue in our mind that's been sitting there for a long time, and then it ripens in sickness or something, right? So something that it's not like consciously done, so something happens, yeah? So that is more like this thing from the past. But that's not all what we mean with karma. There are these instances too, but there's each moment. Each moment is an imprint. Like each moment leaves something there, like leads to a next moment. These are all imprints too. But these are the more kind of from one getting to the next, getting to the next, getting to the next. I mean, really, each moment is an action. Like habits, for example. Like when you sit down to meditate, and you do actively, enhance your love and compassion. That again leaves some imprint that when you get up, it's very easy to be loving and compassionate because you've habituated. Habituation just means also like leaving an imprint there. Habituated yourself into that direction. Same is true for anger. If we allow our anger now to go wild, then so much easier for it to arise again very quickly. Yeah? Like sometimes, I try to control my anger, try to control it, And then one day it's like, I just want to be angry, and I have it, and you go over and over and over, like let's say for 10 minutes, an hour. And then it's so much easier to be angry again the next day, because I've habituated my mind. That one mind has been habituated more. So it's really like, it's like there's no one controlling this, but it's just, this is why there's no self. It's just minds doing its thing, right? There's different minds, and different minds are working with you right now. And then I'd say something, and your wisdom is maybe activated, and you're like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing this. So you're activating that, right? And you don't need a self to do all this, just as your body works perfectly well, you know, without anyone controlling it. It's just doing its thing. Your heart is beating, yeah? So it's like, there's nothing there, okay? It's just your mind doing things, your wisdom, and every moment giving rise to the next, giving rise to the next. You don't need a self. Maybe it's scary. Oh my God, there's nothing there. But that's all you need, yeah? So it's not some kind of power that's there. It's just one mind leading to the next, because you can't have a result with the different causes and conditions coming together. Yeah, you must have certain causes and conditions that give rise to this effect. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're just moving with this slow, it's like this mind moving, this body moving, doing its thing. Yeah, there's an illusion that there's someone controlling it. But that's coming from the mind, from another mind again. It's influencing the other ones. I mean, it's just doing our things. It's very subtle, actually. It's very subtle. So when you come to what your question comes to selflessness, it actually, where's the self there? What's the point of it? Is there someone else controlling me, or is there actually me consciously actually moving on without just karma just overwhelming me? Yeah? I mean, this, you're getting very subtle there, and this is why, middle way. Either there's nothing there, or there's something there. It's like, it's very difficult now to find a balance. So it's good where you're going, but this is why this big question comes. This is a very big question. And as I hear myself talking, I'm going, there's no self. I don't need to be present there anymore. I could just kind of go, because my mind is doing its thing. It's almost the sense like, oh well, if it's doing its thing, I'm not needed anymore, right? It's almost that sense there. Yeah. And I don't expect this question to be answered. You will be able to go subtler and subtler and subtler as you go on. This is just the process. There's no quick fix. Yeah, you're really growing there in a nice direction. But it's almost like to find exactly the middle way. We always fall into, oh, there's something there, there's nothing there, there's something there, there's nothing there. And to actually find the middle, that's the tricky way. So I mean, I hear myself talk. I could say it and go, there's no room for myself. Why am I still around? You know, it's almost like, because with this strong sense of a self, we don't know anything else. But it's just a mind doing its thing. It's just a body doing its thing. And the circumstances that lead to it, and no self needed, no controller needed. Think about it. Yes. Okay, I think let's take it as the last question, because I really don't want to go too much into. No, it's yoga. I've cut short your yoga. I got it. Can we leave it here? I really want you to make sure you get some exercise, some yoga, some training of the body instead of just mind. And then let's save it for the afternoon. Okay. Okay. So let's please go back into silence now. Let's try to just to find that inner space again. Even though
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the enlightened state of Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious body mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain paradise, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful tending yet so generously, may you stay until samsara ends.